So this is chapter 4 of Daniel, lesson 6. And this chapter is primarily, it is all about Nebuchadnezzar, right?
Yep.
So before we get to chapter 4, I want to just go back and kind of rethink Nebuchadnezzar, who he is, what has happened in his life up to this point, and put us all in perspective of what we see in chapter 4. So, who was Nebuchadnezzar?
King of Babylon.
Yes, he's the king of Babylon. And what did he do?
Conquered Judah.
So, say that again, Dave.
He conquered Judah.
Yes, he conquered Judah. He conquered the southern kingdom. And so he has taken the Jewish people into captivity. Now, let's remember, why are they in captivity?
Because of their disobedience.
Yeah, because of their disobedience. So God had warned them, and now he's using Nebuchadnezzar, using Babylon to take them captive. And they will be in Babylon for how many years?
70.
70. That's the length of their captivity. Okay. So that's how they got there. That's how they came under King Nebuchadnezzar. What do we know about the king and his understanding of who God is?
At this point in chapter 1, he had no understanding of God. And if he did, he wouldn't have had much regard for it, I don't think, given how easily he conquered Judah. He wouldn't have much regard for their God. Nor was he thinking yet in terms of one God. He's still of a mindset there are many gods.
Right. Right. So his understanding of Daniel's God is that Daniel's God is just one of many gods. Okay. And as we progress through these chapters, what does he understand about Daniel's God, and what has happened to make him understand a little bit more about Daniel's God?
That he delivers.
We've had
Okay,
the
he
fiery
delivered.
furnace, yeah.
Who does he deliver? Who did he deliver that Nebuchadnezzar saw?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Right.
Mhm.
From the fire.
From the fire.
Mhm.
That's correct.
Yeah.
He knew he was a deliverer. Mhm. And that he was a good God, a delivering God,
Mhm.
G-O-D,
Yeah.
not capital G-O-D. He
Right.
didn't acknowledge
Right.
him as God.
And even back in chapter 2, where Daniel interprets his dream for him and tells him the dream, he admits that Daniel's God is a God of gods, a G, capital G of small g's. But he still, at that point, pays homage to Daniel and gives Daniel all the credit.
Mhm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And did Daniel ask for that credit?
Mm.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely
he
not.
refuted it. He refuted it. Mhm.
Mm-hmm. So he constantly gave God the credit for his ability to interpret the dreams. The Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who did they give credit to when they were thrown into the fiery furnace?
God.
God.
Yeah.
Remember
But
what they said?
He would deliver them, but even if he did, he
He
could
did.
deliver them, but even if he
Mhm.
didn't, they would
Right.
still trust him and not bow down.
Right,
That's
exactly. So throughout these 3 chapters previous to this one, we see Daniel and the captive Jewish boys being used to witness to Nebuchadnezzar
Mhm.
about God, about the God Most High. And at this point, Nebuchadnezzar is still not recognizing. He recognizes that Daniel's God has more power than other gods, but he doesn't recognize Daniel's God as the God,
Right.
right? Okay.
Correct.
So that's where we are when we come to chapter 4. So let's look at chapter 4. And tell me, who wrote this chapter?
King Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay, Nebuchadnezzar. How do you know that?
It says it.
In the
In
first
verse-
person, yeah.
Verse
Yeah.
4, he says, I, Nebuchadnezzar.
Mhm, right, very obvious. And basically, what is he saying in this chapter? What's the chapter? Why is he writing this?
Well, in verse 2, he says, it has seemed good to me to declare the signs and wonders which the Most High God has done for me.
Mhm.
Okay. So he is saying about the Most High God and what he has done for Nebuchadnezzar.
Right,
So it's basically his testimony.
Right.
right.
Okay. Right. Okay. So let's kind of break this chapter down. So first thing you see, like Dave was just saying, he is saying, it seems good to me to let you know what God has done for me.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So then he's going to explain what happened here. In verses 4 through 9, what does he say has happened here? Where was he?
On his bed
Yeah.
and
was
had a
on his bed.
dream.
And he's like, I love this. It says he was at ease. I was at ease in my house and prospering in my palace.
Yeah.
Life was good.
Life was good. It doesn't get any better than this.
Mhm.
Okay. So therein lies the problem.
Mhm.
Okay. I was at ease in my house and prospering in my palace. When he has this dream. And again, he asks all of his magicians to come to interpret it, right? And finally, who comes?
Daniel,
Daniel. He
Daniel.
just
And
doesn't get it.
yeah, right. He's like, why didn't you just go to Daniel in the first place, right?
Right, right.
But what does he say about Daniel?
he knows that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, in verse 9,
Right.
Mhm.
and no mystery baffles you.
Mhm. But before that, he said, Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God.
Mhm.
He
Right.
had to get that in there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you know that when they were taken captive, they were given new names. They were giving Babylonian names. And so,
Right.
yeah. So but he does recognize after these first 3 chapters and all that he has seen in Daniel, that the Spirit of God is in him.
Mhm.
In verses 10 through 18, we have the dream. So he describes the dream. It's not like he's asking them to tell him the dream. He describes it.
Mhm.
So what does that dream look like? Just kind of somebody sum it up for us. What is the dream about? What does that look like?
It's a beautiful tree,
It's a beautiful tree. How big?
huge, with abundant fruit and shade and everything you need.
Hmm?
And it was visible throughout the entire earth. It was huge
Mhm.
Okay.
and strong.
Huge and strong,
Mhm.
fruitful,
Mhm. The beast
supplying.
laid under it and ate. Mhm. It was all sufficient.
That's a good word. All sufficient, this tree was.
Mhm.
And what else does the dream say about this tree?
That it had a band of iron and bronze around it.
Okay. And why is that? What was to happen to the tree?
Yeah,
Gonna get cut down.
yeah, it was to
Okay.
be chopped down, and then the stump had the band of iron and bronze around it.
Mhm.
To preserve it, right?
Right.
preserve that stump. Okay. So that's what the dream was. Nebuchadnezzar said, "This was my dream." Then Daniel comes, who has the Spirit of God in him, and Daniel is to interpret it. So what happens? Let's look at verse. I want to look at verse 17 first before we get to the interpretation, because Nebuchadnezzar is telling the dream. And in his dream, in verse 15, what happens when the tree is to be chopped down?
Well, Nebuchadnezzar would lose his mind. He would take on the mind of a beast. His hair would grow long. His fingernails would be very long. The dew of heaven would cover him. And this was to happen for 7 periods of time until he came to his senses. It was to be a decree until he came to his senses and recognized that God is God.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice when he's giving this account of the dream, he talks about the tree, and then you see it change to, in verse 15, but leave the stump, and it says, and let him. Did you notice that?
Oh.
So immediately you see the tree represents a person.
Mm-hmm.
Just when
Oh,
you see that.
I thought that him was Nebuchadnezzar when he lost his mind. Oh, so the him is the tree.
No. You're right, Blythe.
Oh,
You're right. But I'm just showing you the shift from describing the tree to then saying him, which means the tree represents him, Nebuchadnezzar.
Oh, okay.
So it becomes a person rather than, the trees. It just shows you that the tree represents Nebuchadnezzar, which Daniel is going to explain to us soon anyway. But just to watch those pronouns and see that we're no longer just talking about a tree, we're talking about person.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then in 17, and this is still Nebuchadnezzar talking, explaining this. The sentence is by the decree of the watchers. These are the holy watchers that came and gave this decree that this would happen. To the end that the living may know that the Most High does what?
Rules the
Hmm?
kingdom of
Rules the kingdom
men.
mankind.
Mhm.
and gives it to whom he will.
And sets over it
The lowliest of men.
the lowliest of men. That word really means humble.
Right.
Humble. So he's the ruler of mankind. So that's the dream. And the purpose of the dream was so that Nebuchadnezzar would come to his senses and recognize that Daniel's God is the God Most High.
Mm-hmm.
And then he asked Daniel to interpret it. So let's look at the interpretation that Daniel gives him. And I want you to look at how Daniel feels about this interpretation.
He's appalled.
Probably scared as well.
Yeah,
He's
who
gotta tell him
wants
this.
to deliver bad news to the king?
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Keep the messenger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just seemed this dream, how he could not have made the connection that it was about him.
Nebuchadnezzar, like why he didn't understand it was about him.
I mean, some of the other dreams, all right, but Daniel doesn't even have to go pray about this one.
Yeah.
So it's still obvious. It doesn't say that he went away and
Mhm. Well, what does that tell you about the state of Nebuchadnezzar's,
that's of
right, of
even
his
when
thinking?
it's right in front of you.
Mhm.
This couldn't possibly be about me, you know.
Right, please tell me it's not.
Mhm,
Mhm.
mhm.
He was so
Well,
haughty and arrogant that
Mhm.
he couldn't even imagine. I'm assuming that was his thought.
Right. Remember the previous dream about the statue and the head of gold?
Mhm.
And who was the head of gold?
With him.
Nebuchadnezzar.
It was Nebuchadnezzar as the head of gold. And then he made this idol of pure gold. So you can see his power, what he's thinking, this power trip that he's on.
Mhm.
So then you have this, and it's like, well, how could that be me? So Daniel, Daniel is dismayed for a while and alarmed. And what does the king say to him?
Do not let this dream and its interpretation alarm you.
Why would the king say that to him? Don't be alarmed by this.
You're going to pray.
Well, he wants to hear the truth, and he doesn't want someone not telling him the truth because he's afraid to say so.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So then Daniel tells him the truth, right? And what does that truth involve? Look at verse 22.
Well, it's about Nebuchadnezzar. And as the tree was grand and strong and everything, so are you, King. Your greatness has grown and reaches to heaven, and your dominion to the ends of the earth.
True. So he was one of the most powerful, one of the strongest kings at that time. And Daniel's like, yeah, the tree shows that. The tree shows that this is your kingdom. You are strong. But what's going to happen when the tree is to be chopped down? And he tells him what will happen.
Well, that that his mind will become that of a beast. His hair will grow long. His fingernails will grow long. He'll eat what the animals eat, graze on the grass of the field until 7 periods of time pass over him, until he recognizes that God is God.
Okay, so Daniel is correctly interpreting the dream and telling him, you are strong, but you will be cut down.
Mhm.
Now, does Nebuchadnezzar have an opportunity to prevent that from happening? Okay, where do you see that?
Verse 29.
Verse 27.
27, yeah,
Yeah.
break off your sins.
Oh, yes, verse 27. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
And he had 12 months.
And tell me, what does it say? So you have time to do this. You can change this.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Here's what will happen. You can change it. And perhaps, and what does Daniel say? What does that look like, changing it?
Repent.
Practice righteousness.
Mhm. Mercy to the poor.
Blythe, thank you.
Be humble.
Break off.
Be humble, yes. And you might lengthen your prosperity. You might lengthen your prosperity. And the fact that now we look at the next at the next, verse 29, when it says at the end of 12 months. So you see the time frame. Since Daniel has told him, you can change this. And now it's 12 months later. What does that tell you about God?
He's merciful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Long suffering.
yeah,
He gives chances.
yeah. He gives you a chance. He points out your sin and gives you an opportunity to repent and gives you time.
But he doesn't forget.
Oh, yeah, he doesn't forget. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but you're right.
It doesn't
Yeah,
go away.
right. Which also says about God what he says he will do,
Right.
right?
But
He will do it.
we think, well, perhaps he won't. If I
Oh,
wait long enough, maybe he won't.
yeah, that's a good point, Patricia. It's like, so after a month goes by,
You think, nah, it's fine.
it
He
hasn't
might have got-
happened. So,
He might have got complacent.
mhm.
But I also wonder if it has to like when he brings Daniel, he says, in whom the spirits of the holy gods, small g. So even though he knows he's seen him do miraculous things for people, it still hasn't resonated enough. And even though Daniel says that this is the decree of the Most High, that Most High isn't his Most High. So there's like his arrogance is not just arrogance, it is arrogance in the face of God.
Right.
So while it's God giving him time, which is so merciful and gracious,
Mhm.
that stuff hasn't resonated enough. Even though Daniel is like, hey, you should do something different.
Yeah,
I don't think it's gotten through. Like he's seen these things happen. They're miraculous, but not necessarily enough because they haven't happened to him maybe. But do you know, I just think it hasn't gotten through all the way because he hasn't changed his words.
Mhm.
And that's very obvious in verse 30 when he's looking out over the great Babylon, which I built by my power, for the glory of my majesty. Yeah, it's obvious he hasn't gotten it.
absolutely. That statement right there just sums up his whole attitude.
Mhm.
Another thing I
Well-
think going on with what Courtney said in his description of the dream is the watcher, one of the holy ones, plural. And when he talks to Daniel, Daniel has the spirit of the holy gods, little g, plural.
Mhm.
And then when Daniel describes things, the watcher is because a message of the Holy One, singular. So once again, like everybody's saying, Nebuchadnezzar does not recognize there's only one God.
Well, that was a new idea. I mean, other than the Israelites, the rest of the known world at that time had been living probably under thousands of years, several thousand years of polytheism. And
Right.
so I can understand the difficulty, I guess, and also that's a monumental shift from going to gods, small g, to a god, large G. And I
Mhm.
think their tendency may have been that these smaller gods kind of existed to serve them rather than them serve God. You know, they called on all these different gods. Okay, you do this for me, you do that for me.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, the Most High God makes himself, no, it doesn't work that way.
I think too that it really does bear application. Like it does matter what we think about who God is. And that he's not just a God among other gods. And I think this is part of who we are as believers in
Right.
Jesus, that how we think about it. And it's not just I'll believe this part and I'll believe that part and I'll take this. I don't think this is like a problem from way back then. I think this happens now.
Yes, it
Thanks
does.
a lot, Sue. Thanks.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you're making it part of our lives. Absolutely.
And we all have potential to be little Nebuchadnezzars.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
It's easy, very easy to use God for our own benefit. You know, we're very quick to call out and say, I need this. Please do this. Please answer this way, instead of taking time to worship him for who he is. You know, the Lord God Almighty. We ought to stand in awe of him before we request anything of him. We need to acknowledge his greatness.
So you're saying that we treat him as a small g God
At times,
at times, right?
I don't think it's not intentional.
Right.
It's because, you know, we reflect on the verse, ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. You know, we have not because we ask not. I think we get those verses in our mind and we forget to worship, to bow down to the King of Kings, as Daniel did, who recognized over and over, you know, it wasn't about him at all. It was about the power of God, his omnipotence, his, you know, his holiness, his righteousness. And we're privileged to bow before him. We're privileged to call on him. But we shouldn't call on him just for our own benefit. We need to acknowledge who he is. And it's easy to fall into that. I want,
that
please
little
do.
complacency, right?
Mhm.
And in the rest of the lesson, we're going to be talking about this, about the most holy, the most high God, and
Right.
really bringing our thinking back to exactly who he is and what he rules over, and understanding just the awesomeness of that God that we worship. So, and this was what Nebuchadnezzar needed to understand. And while he had seen miraculous things happen through this God, he still he's not made that shift that Dave was talking about to the one God. And again, Babylon is not Israel. So
Right.
this is their upbringing was not about one God. So here God is working mightily in the life of King Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon to show himself, and using Daniel and the Jewish boys to show Nebuchadnezzar who God is. So it's a big picture. It's a very big picture. And we always have to keep that in mind, what God is doing in an enemy nation of Israel's here. So this, we're at what verse do we get? We're on 29. At the end of 12 months, when he's saying, look at what I have built by my own hands. And while he was still speaking, the kingdom was taken from him.
Right.
After 12 months, just when he thought he was safe. You know, maybe when he thought that's not going to happen. You know, and I think there's another application we could get into about our own lives. You know, we think maybe we've gotten away with something, but it's always going to come back. So he is removed from the kingdom. And for a period of seven periods, he is acting like an animal. And in verse 34, what happens at the end of that time?
He lifts his eyes to heaven
Mhm. Yeah. Lifts his eyes to heaven, and his reason returns to him. He says, I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever.
Mhm.
And then I love, what do you see about God and what he says next? In verses 34 and 35, these are huge verses
Mhm.
about God, about this Most High God that Nebuchadnezzar now recognizes.
His dominion is everlasting.
It's as if he's got it at last.
Okay, he's got it at last.
Mhm.
Kind of the last one in 35 is interesting. None can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done?
Mhm. Why is that interesting?
Took him a long time to get there.
It's because some of us are really hard-headed.
What do people tend to do when something goes wrong? What's their question to God?
Why me?
Why?
Why?
Mhm.
Why? Yeah. And Nebuchadnezzar says, you can't ask him, what have you done?
Mhm.
Mhm. In fact, look at verse 37. What does Nebuchadnezzar say about God?
I praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are true and his ways just.
All his works are true, are right, and his ways are just.
And he is able to humble those who walk
Humble
in
pride.
pride.
Oh, there you go. Was Nebuchadnezzar prideful?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And he's saying, think about this. What had God done to Nebuchadnezzar here?
He'd humbled him.
What did that look like?
Well, becoming a beast.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
Who
pretty.
was he before that happened? Who was he? The most powerful,
Mhm.
right? And then he becomes like a beast. And Nebuchadnezzar says, that's right. That is true. What God did is right.
Mhm.
What God did is right, and it was just.
Mhm.
His whole vocabulary about God changed in that moment. And it
Mhm.
went from Daniel, God, to holy gods, to the
Mhm.
Most High. Every part of it, his whole vocabulary changed.
Right.
Mhm.
He
Yeah.
went from, in the dream, he saw himself as, I mean, was free, and the beasts were finding fruit and being fed through him. And after everything happened to him, he realized that God is the fruit and the tree, and he was now a beast who fed from God.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. But what do you think about what he says, that everything God does is just? Is just. You know, when we're in situations that are difficult, things don't always go the way we want them to. What is our attitude toward God?
How long, oh Lord?
No, there's Psalms, right? How long?
Mhm.
Do we always feel that the right thing happened to us, that we got what we deserved? You know,
If our heart is right,
well,
if our mindset is right, we will acknowledge that
Well,
we
for
have
one-
what we deserve. Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, and thinking about this morning, I don't think God's justice depends on me always understanding
Right.
fully.
mhm. Right.
I think
But-
Nebuchadnezzar is praising God for doing this to him because he realizes he would never have come to this point without being humbled by God.
Can you imagine after this has happened and he sits down and reflects all the way back God's handiwork, what he saw God do, you know, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you know, the statue, God's work, and his attention to Nebuchadnezzar. I think that in itself would be humbling, that this God took this much time to bring me to where I am now. And I really don't deserve to be given my kingdom back. But he's restored me. It wasn't just that Nebuchadnezzar got it. He was restored. He was reconciled.
And his kingdom was even greater than what was taken away from him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. But you see God's purpose. This is the thing we have to understand is what is God's purpose in what is happening to us? You know, the end of maybe our trial, we want a different end to it, but what is God's purpose in that trial? He's trying to show himself. You know,
Right.
he says, you will be in this situation until you recognize that I am the Most High God.
Mm-hmm.
So the purpose is not about for us, you know, in our situation, really, is it? It's
Nope.
about recognizing and showing God's power.
Mm-hmm.
Showing God's power. So God was using that situation, and Nebuchadnezzar recognizes what God did to me was just. It was
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
It was right.
I deserved it, every bit of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the end result, you know, if we come out saying, yes, God was right, because so many people question God and say, why, you know, or God owes me an explanation about this. No, he doesn't. He is right and just, and he operates out of love for us.
Right.
Well, and we see
So
that in Daniel in so much that Daniel does. Like this, like everything, if you look at Daniel next to Nebuchadnezzar, like Daniel was in captivity. It wasn't necessarily his sin, it was the sin of a whole nation, but he still was there. And in everything Daniel did, he used it to glorify God. And then you have
Right.
Nebuchadnezzar who literally said, the glory of my majesty, like, and then his brain is taken away from him. Like, it's this picture of like, this is the way you can do it that is beautiful and God honoring, or this that's full of pride and arrogance, and then you fall apart.
right. Yeah, so you can do it this way or this way. You choose. But yeah. I mean, bottom line is this, we just have to recognize, like he did, that what God does is just.
Mm-hmm.
It is just, and out of his love. And it's always it's like Israel. Why are they in Babylon? So in order for them to be brought back to God, they have to be taken into captivity,
Mm-hmm.
so that they will recognize again and be brought back to God.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how he has to do it sometimes, and he did it all through the book of Judges, when they would wander off and become their own power and strength, and then he would have to bring a king against them to bring them back to God, say, oh, right, God. So it's always about God just setting us back on course.
Mm-hmm.
And what he
And
does
like-
is just.
And like David said, you know, this wasn't a nation who had fallen away from God. They just didn't know God.
Yeah, that's what I noticed, that God, this whole book is showing me God reaching out not just to Israel, but to the nations and these other
Right.
kingdoms. Like Jesus, you know, came for the New Testament theme about that it's for the Gentiles and not just the Jews, and Jesus came
Whosoever. Mm-hmm.
Right, but this is showing God reaching out to everybody. And it's amazing to see, like thinking about witnessing to these other nations that weren't Israel. Like, you know,
four individuals brought into a nation that knew nothing of God, and they became the salt and the light. And oh my goodness,
Yeah. And we've talked about that, about Daniel's purpose for being there, about why was Daniel picked, and for him to be that light and people that would not bow down. So their testimony in that foreign nation and their captivity is going to show God in that to that nation. Yeah. Like I was struck this morning again too, Blythe, about this is Babylon.
Yeah.
This is Babylon. And this is what God is doing. Yeah. With the king of Babylon. Yeah.
It's amazing.
So with that amazing understanding, let's look at some of the scriptures that you looked at on days 4 and 5 in your lesson that show us what does it mean that the God Most High and the sovereignty of the God Most High. And let's see if we can develop a picture of what that looks like, because that is important for us to understand. Okay.
These verses are powerful, to read them one right after the other.
So what do you see about the God Most High?
Well, first of all, in Genesis, he's the creator of heaven and earth.
Okay. Creator of heaven and earth.
Creator.
So that starts it right there. Right? So what else do you see about this God Most High?
He gave the nations their inheritance in Deuteronomy and divided all mankind, set up boundaries for the people according to the number of sons of Israel. So he just created the nations and that whole process.
Yeah.
I love verse 4 of Psalms 47. And I added verse 4 in here. He chooses our inheritance for us. He wants us to have it all. This holy God of ours. He's to be feared.
In Psalm 57, he vindicates me. It says.
Yes. And we've seen that with Daniel, right? We've seen that. What do you see in Psalm 83?
You alone are the most high over all the earth. His name is the Lord. That's where you see the Lord in all caps.
Yeah.
There are no other gods. He makes it
very clear, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Painfully clear at this point, yes.
You are the only. Yeah.
Daniel, he delivers his servants.
What do you see about this God Most High in the reference from Daniel 5?
He's granted sovereignty, grandeur, glory to Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar's father. That's interesting. 5:18. And Nebuchadnezzar recognized that the Most High God is ruler over the realm of mankind and sets it on whom he wishes.
Okay, so he is the one who gave Nebuchadnezzar power and sovereignty. He is the one who put him in place there. And he's also the one who took it away from him.
Right.
So he has the power to put him in a position of authority. And when he was abusing it, he also was the one that took it away from him until he recognized where that power came from. That's the God Most High. Let's talk for a minute about on day 5 about what does this God Most High rule over? So let's kind of get a picture of what does he rule over?
The ends of the earth.
In Psalm 59, he rules over Jacob or Israel, and 66, he rules over all the nations,
Hmm?
and 103 over all. Mm.
And yeah, so that's, you have right there in those verses, he rules over the people to the ends of the earth. He rules over nations. And he rules over all.
All the universe, yeah.
Throne is in
And
heaven.
beyond.
We look back at what the first verse back in the God Most High was that he created heaven and earth.
Right.
He created it, and now he rules over everything in it. Look, take a look for a minute at some of the other verses. We're not going to go through each one individually, but just take a look at those verses and tell me, maybe one that speaks to you about what he rules over.
Well, the first couple of verses in Isaiah say, as I have planned it, so will it be, God says.
Mhm.
He has a plan and a purpose for everything, which is nice to know.
Yeah, it's nice to know. Yeah.
Nice to know. It cannot be thwarted.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I
well,
think about that with, I don't mean to interrupt you, Blythe, but
No,
I think
no,
about that with our elections. We're
I
so
know.
worried about our vote, but ultimately, God is going to have in there who he wishes to use. And we shouldn't be afraid. We do our part. That was comforting to me. I knew it, but to have it restated.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This whole study today was kind of reassuring in terms of our country.
Yes.
He has a purpose, he has a plan, and we have to just trust that.
Mm-hmm.
I like Psalm 139, verse 13, for you created my inmost being. And it's the time in the Bible it talks about knitting, which I'm rather keen on, really.
Yes, right. She
Knit
knits.
me together in my mother's womb.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is rather wonderful, isn't it? Those few verses.
I found Ezekiel 14 interesting. Faithful men can only deliver themselves. If God sends destruction through the land, they are powerless with God's plan in his hand. You have to kind of ponder over that a minute.
If God brings destruction on the land,
we can't do anything. Our power is nothing.
Unless he appoints it. So
right. Unless he appoints it.
Right.
Yeah, I also found it a good reminder in Luke and Job that God has control over Satan.
Right.
Yes. Right. Yes. Right. So
aren't we glad?
So again, if God has control over Satan, what do we need to be afraid of?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. Right. Right. See, this is the thing about understanding what he has control over. There's really nothing he doesn't have control over. So what is our what is our part to play in that? What do we see Daniel doing?
Trusting.
Trusting.
Being obedient.
Being
Mhm.
faithful and living a righteous life.
Yep. Just
He
the
doesn't
obedience.
waver. He doesn't waver
Mhm.
ever. You know, you wonder if he's really human. You know, he's about as perfect as he can be without being perfect, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. But his example we see is just that he knows who his God is.
Mhm.
He knows without a doubt who his God is. And he is not going to let anything move him from that understanding. He will not bow to anything that is not representative of his God. So the obedience, and again, where is he?
In captivity.
He's in captivity, okay?
Right.
In captivity. I mean, we can be in captivity in a lot of different ways and places.
right.
Okay, so then how do we respond to that? And knowing, knowing that God is in control of nations, that he isn't rules over kings and kingdoms and people and Satan, all of it. Right. This next week in our country is going to be very life-changing. It's going to be very life-changing. So, but God doesn't change.
Right.
He's the same. And so whatever happens in this election is not going to change who we are and who our God is.
That's right.
And how do we respond then? And, think about the state of our country and what do we need? Maybe we need to have something shake us up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, look at 2 Samuel 16. The Lord uses whom he chooses to chastise us or bless us. It is by his choice we receive blessing or curse.
Mm-hmm. I think too, it's not just knowing who God is and remaining faithful. It's knowing who we are in Jesus and
right.
Who we are. So many people don't know who they are, and young people are trying to be this, that. They don't know who they are, and they would if they knew Jesus.
Yeah,
because that's who you are really. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's a great statement, Patricia, because people don't know, and we've gotten so far away from generation after generation knowing.
Yeah.
So here we are Daniels in our society, and we have the opportunity, to show people who they are in Jesus, and that God rules over whatever happens. God rules. And I mean, maybe we're like Nebuchadnezzar and we think we don't need to be corrected. This country maybe thinks we're doing everything right and we don't need to be corrected. And maybe we do need to be corrected. Maybe we do need God to shake some things up so that, we can come back to refocusing on who we're supposed to be. So it's coming, whatever it is, it's coming in a week.
Right.
So, I love that people have mentioned this was comforting. This is comforting.
Right. It is.
Yeah. So whatever happens a week from now, God is still going to be in control. And we are still going to be God's children. And we just need to be like Daniel. And just not change our thoughts on God. No matter what's happening around us, God is still God. The Most High God. The Most High God. The all-powerful creator of everything.
And may I add to that, this is a perfect time for us to be salt and light.
Absolutely.
To be loving in a situation where we may not feel so lovable or that we're loved. We're going to see things probably like we haven't seen before, but it gives us an opportunity to be salt and light.
Right. So that's our role. We just all need to be Daniels in whatever is coming. And I love this, just this lesson is just like, no, you know that God is the most high God. You
Right,
know that,
right.
you know it. So that's all you have to remember, and then be obedient to what he is calling us to do.
And it fell at the perfect time. You know, the Lord
Yes.
knew the timing of our stuff,
Right, right.
you know?
No, I always love that he does that when we choose a study to do. And I mean, it's just always relevant. Scripture is always relevant.
Always.
So here we are living in Babylon, and but we serve the Most High God.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what we have to keep reminding each other about. And we're in this, you're not out there alone.
Nope.
You're not alone. We're all in this together, serving the same God. So be encouraged, be encouraged this week. Those of you who, Andrea and Patricia, I'm sure you've got things going on in your country
Yeah, we had a budget.
that are troubling. So yeah, so there you are. You be Daniel in England, and we'll be Daniel here in America.
Yeah.
Because the whole world it's the whole world. It's all
Yeah.
nations that he controls.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I'll be Daniel in Spain next week.
Okay. Okay.
I'm in
You
Italy
can be
now.
Daniel in Spain.
I leave for Spain tomorrow.
Well, and on Friday, I will be Daniel in Athens, Greece.
That's right.
Yes.
Are we still gonna be on next week, even though
So
you're
that's my next statement. No, we will not have class next week.